The so-called great savior of democracy is back, fresh off his Caribbean vacation where he got sunburned into oblivion. President Biden was out in Valley Forge to kick off his first major campaign speech of the year. But it looks like the big guy is all out of big ideas. Instead of talking about his policies or how he'll make your lives better, Biden bashed MAGA supporters and January 6th. The president repeatedly mentioning George Washington while fashioning himself as a defender against dictatorship.
Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. And yet Trump and his MAGA supporters not only embrace political violence, but they laugh about it. So hear me clearly. I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never. It has no place in a democracy. This is like something out of a fairy tale, a bad fairy tale. He went on to say he'd be a dictator on day one.
Biden also claiming that you better vote for him or it's the end of democracy.
I make this sacred pledge to you. The defense, protection, and preservation of American democracy will remain, as it has been, the central cause of my presidency. Democracy is on the ballot. Your freedom is on the ballot. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. And I promise you, I will not let Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans force us to walk away.
And while Joe gins up fear that your next-door neighbor could be a MAGA extremist, the media just got busted for perpetuating an extremism hoax. You may remember how Democrats and the liberal press breathlessly hyped the narrative that dangerous right-wing radicals had infiltrated our American military. Well, Joe Biden's own Department of Defense looked into the allegations, and they found no evidence that the U.S. military is packed with violent extremists. According to the report, there were fewer than 100 substantiated cases per year of extremist activities by members of the military in recent years. All right, Jesse, I'll start with you. Joe Biden ran, and he was going to unite the country. How does pitting 73 million Americans against the rest of America unite the country?
Well, by the way, what are you doing for January 6th? You want to come over to my house? We're having a little Stop the Steal watch party and dress Jesse Jr. up in animal skins, play a little game we like to call Find the DNC Pipe Bomb. Year after year, we have not found it. Pop quiz, Jessica. Which president skipped the 9/11 ceremony and did the January 6th ceremony? 3, 2, 1. That would be Joe Biden. This guy can't save democracy when he's trying to rip his opponent off of the ballot, slap him with gags, and have him arrested. Judge, he ran his first campaign on Charlottesville. The second campaign is now on January 6th. He actually thinks Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. So the first campaign he ran on was a hoax. The second one, this is now a joke. You can't actually be from the party that literally started a racist insurrection and accuse the other party of the same thing. That's like Bill Clinton saying it's disqualifying for someone to sleep with an intern and run for office. I am so tired of Joe Biden running on January 6th. If I were Donald Trump, I'd run on July 4th. No one is more patriotic than Donald Trump. I remember back in like the late 80s, he was talking about the Japanese ripping us off while Joe Biden was blocking a black man from the court. And Joe Biden's letting China pillage this country. Donald Trump launched a trade war against them. Donald Trump secured the border. Joe Biden's letting 5 million mystery men just wander in. What kind of patriotic person does that? Donald Trump spent his whole life building skyscrapers, creating jobs, developing beautiful tracts of land. Joe Biden's sitting on his keister, backslapping and glad-handing his whole life.
The country?
Done nothing. He's done nothing. Okay. And the racism thing has to stop, Jessica, okay? Donald Trump dated black women. Has Joe Biden ever dated a black woman? Donald Donald Trump was palling around with Don King when your guy was palling around with segregationists.
Okay.
Joe Biden has been.
No. I'm not finished. All right.
There's a Fox News alert.
Oh, fine. I'll finish after the alert.
All right. We have a Fox News alert. The United States Supreme Court has agreed to hear the appeal of former President Trump's Colorado ballot disqualification. Oral arguments will be held Thursday, February 8th. All right, Sandra, let's talk about that. Colorado, the justices, all Democrats, took Donald Trump, off the ballot. Maine Secretary of State, a Democrat, takes him off the ballot. How is it that you've got the candidate for president, Joe Biden, saying he's saving democracy when his party is taking the #1 at this point sought-after candidate, not just in the Republican Party, but in terms of the polls, Donald Trump, off the ballot?
And what we have seen in the polls is this is only firing up his base even more. So the more they go after him, the more they try to take him off the ballot. Message is this fires up the base, improves his status in the polls, and it will benefit him in this election year. I think there's a lot to take in here, and tying it into our overall discussion with what we heard from President Biden a short time ago. I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. There was a very firm message that was delivered by the president there. Agree with it, disagree with it. That was a president that is fired up and ready to run against that man, the former president, Donald Trump. As far as the content is concerned, tie this into this as well, what you just said, Judge. He said, President Biden today, democracy is on the ballot. Freedom is on the ballot. Jonathan Turley came in on the air right after that speech concluded. And he said, we would be remiss not to say that this has been one of the most anti-free speech presidencies of our lifetime, potentially in our history of the country. Nikki Haley was on our air right before Biden took to that podium. She used it as a campaign message, right? She said, watch, you're going to see President Biden tee off against Donald Trump in his first campaign speech. If you put Donald Trump up there as your nominee, this is what you're going to see, this Trump-Biden fight that's going to continue. In that message, Biden said Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. That is irony, considering President Biden stood up there and did not tout what he has done, right? He could not look back at the past of what his performance in office. Jessica, I saw the look. Nice to see you guys are getting along here. But how can you tout $3 a gallon gasoline right now, right? An economy where consumer prices are up 17%. Go to the grocery store right now. That's why he's not polling well in the economy. And security, going back to the border. People don't feel safe in their neighborhoods right now. So this is all on the ballot.
All right, Jessica, you want to respond to that?
Sure, I would love to. So today's speech was not about anything but January 6th and saving democracy. You can give a speech tomorrow about the economy, and there have been commentators all over every major channel, including our own, talking about how good today's job report numbers were. 216,000 jobs added, 3.7% unemployment, 4.1% wage growth. And one of the most interesting things is it's the lowest black unemployment rate that we've ever had in history. He has a lot to talk about, and he will do that. But today was about saving democracy. And the contrast between a Joe Biden, who, yes, whether he is invigorated from having some time off, which he rightly deserved, or maybe this is just how campaign mode is going to be, and I hope that is true. He's talking about this, and Donald Trump is posting memes about how, quote, God made Trump, and over 40 posts going after E. Jean Carroll, a woman he was found to have sexually assaulted and defamed. The reason that Joe Biden is talking about January 6th and former President Trump living in the past is because he has not moved on. From the big lie to the fact that we just saw in the Detroit News last night, the story came out, that the Trump campaign directly coordinated the filing of a certificate signed by 16 Michigan Republicans that falsely claimed that he won the state. Jack Smith will obviously get his day in court to bring the case about January 6th election interference. We will see what happens in Fulton County in Georgia. But this man continues to lie to the entire world about what happened in the election, and he did foment what happened on January 6th. All of his friends and family and closest advisors were texting him, begging him to stop doing it. And what did he do? He said Mike Pence didn't do what he was supposed to a crowd, and I guess you could call them tourists, some people carrying the Confederate flag. There was a noose on the premises of January 6th. and cops were beaten, windows smashed, people showed up with zip ties. This was not a friendly affair. So this is the contrast, and this is why Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, because you have a person who wants to subvert democracy and a person who accepts democratic results. And the Colorado case was brought by Republicans. It also went through a 5-day bench trial. It should go to the Supreme Court. And I imagine that they will rule that his name should be on the ballot.
Of course.
But it has nothing to do with Joe Biden.
It's anti-democratic to take your opponent's name off the ballot.
Joe Biden has nothing to do with it. The same way that Joe Biden had nothing to do with
I'm not going to get into that.
Laptop.
All right, Greg, I want you to listen to this sound. The media peddled better than this. The media peddled Lloyd Austin's claims of extremism in the military, which we now know is false. Take a listen.
These extreme views aren't new. They have existed within the military for a while.
Is Austin the right person to handle rooting out extremism from the military?
He absolutely is. He does have a unique understanding of the challenges that we face here.
I think this is a major problem. This is something that the military, that Congress, that everyone in positions of power need to be looking at and investigating and taking very seriously.
Well, this is all part of the same strategy. Absent of policy and ideas, all they do is cling to January 6th, which, believe it or not, was not an insurrection. It's probably the only coup in history that didn't have any arms. And the person that died was an unarmed protester named Ashley Babbitt,
who was a veteran.
So let's talk about this military extremism hoax, right? The media embraced this. I'm going to compare this to Epstein, which every time we talk about Epstein, we say, oh, these people are innocent until proven guilty. We didn't say that about the military. MSNBC, quote, extremism in the military is a serious national security threat. Where's the data on that, you bozos? CNN, the military has long had an extremist problem. What will it do now to finally solve it? Where was your evidence on that, you douchebags? NPR, the military confronts extremism one conversation at a time. You guys are asses. Okay, we've had millions of people risk their lives defending this country. And you have this old, decrepit crone falsely smearing these patriots with extremism, not because they knew it to be true, but in order to create fear to drive voters to their side. And then the truth comes out. They released this report before Christmas, right? They knew that the media would let it slide because they were complicit in this lie. So they knew it would slide. We're the only people covering this. But if they had found racism in this would be on the cover of every news site. It would be linked to Fox News. It would be linked to Donald Trump. They would call our military hopelessly racist. We would need more CRT, more ESG. Has Joe ever apologized to the border agents, which he did the same thing to? He ran with a smear, targeted a private citizen, and then when it found out to be false, which we all knew it was false, he said nothing. Has he apologized to the military for this, for creating and fomenting a hoax against American citizens? That was deliberate. It wasn't something that got out of hand like a rally. This was planned. They went after these people. And now, think about the Epstein thing, okay? Every time you hear the Epstein story, right, they preface it with a legal preamble. We have no evidence of wrongdoing. Hey, douchebags, that didn't stop you from calling people white supremacists, from pushing the P tape, from going after the border agents. And now it's Epstein's pals, innocent till proven guilty, but military, border agents, they're guilty from the get-go. Biden should hold a press conference and announce these findings, but he won't. He's a tool, a pawn, a callous old coot who exploits division to preserve power.
Jesse?
Wow.
You're supposed to say, and that's what I have to say about that.
That's the end
Well,
of
I'll be talking about this tonight on my show at 10 p.m.
I just want to add to
Jesse?
do you want me to add to the news so you can?
No,
build
don't
off-
add to the
Okay.
news.
Yeah.
We don't need
Go
any
ahead.
more
Well,
news.
So the Supreme Court is not going to help Joe Biden out this time.
No,
Joe Biden had so much help the last time he ran. He had a once-in-a-100-year virus come in. The FBI descended on Minneapolis, went to the coroner's office. You know, those tapes were suppressed. And then he gets help from the feds and the agency with the laptop. And Pfizer, happens to discover the vaccine and works, the day after the election. Come on. Joe doesn't have any of that this time. The country's wide-eyed about what to expect when it comes to rigging. And it's not going to go the same way.
According to Alina Habba, the Supreme Court is in Donald Trump's pocket. She was on TV last night talking about how Brett Kavanaugh is going to do the right thing because you know how he got on the court.
Well, I don't think it's hard to do the right thing. It's going to be 9-0.
What she said
we'll get a little help from the.
My understanding of what she said was she's concerned that people may think that because there were appointments by Donald Trump that the Supreme Court will go that way. She doesn't believe that to be the case.
She's not concerned.
This administration, the Biden administration, has done more to destroy free speech, the ability of the press to provide information to us, and to win the election for Joe Biden. It was Orwellian the way they handled it, and that's why he won. Because had people known about that laptop and all of the
Trump
dirt
was president when the laptop was censored for 24 hours. Also,
there was nothing he could do about it.
So it's Donald Trump's fault that the folks who were friends with Obama and Biden came out and said that's Russian disinformation, suppress the laptop?
Okay, so
no, I don't think so. That was Biden, and Anthony Blinken himself said that he's the one who contacted people to get together to say that it was disinformation.
Okay, when something happens during your administration,
oh really?
Oh, really? Yes, that's what I hear every day from you guys. Joe Biden's watch, on Donald Trump's watch, Hunter Biden's laptop story was censored for a mere 24 hours.
Yeah,
off Twitter, and people were still, until the election, it was 24 hours, Judge. People still had more time.
Come on, Jessica. Who are you kidding? That laptop story was not allowed to be discussed on social media.
It is.
Only the New York Post reported it. You're wrong.
But I'm not wrong. And
we'll talk about it during the break.
We
are monitoring the breaking news.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.